But just to introduce myself, I'm Sam, Applications Advisor and Placement Advisor for the university, and thanks so much for joining us today for our Q&A about how you can really make your application stand out. So I'm joined by my most excellent of colleagues, Maxine, as well, and we'll start off with just a bit of a little bit of a spiel about application processes and how we think you should stand out, but really what info I want to focus on today is the Q&A. So before anything, I wanted just to give you guys an overview of the common stages you might face in a graduate application process, whether that's with a big employer or a small employer, particularly in the UK. So apologies if some of you might have already faced this, but there's quite a number of different stages involved. So first of all, for pretty much 99.5% of employers, you're usually faced with a written application to start things off. This can be a CV, cover letter, it can be an application form. Really though, for any of these, the core thing they're looking for is for you to talk about why your skills, your values, your motivations make you a good fit for the particular role that you're going for. Alongside this, particularly with large employers, you'll commonly have some psychometric tests, which are basically online tests that assess your ability in a particular skill. Really common ones around this are numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, and logical reasoning. So, for example, what this might look like, let's say you're going for a role that in some way involves numbers. You might do a numerical reasoning test where you go online, you answer a number of different questions about numerical problems, and the more answers that you get right, and often the more that you get right in the quicker time, the higher your score is. Then usually recruiters will use your written application results and your psychometric test results to look at if you should go to the next stage. And what that next stage looks like is quite different for different employers, but these are some of the key things that it can involve. So it can involve two different types of interview. A really common one these days is something called a video interview, which is not an interview over Skype or Zoom. What it instead is where you will log into software, some sort of software online usually, you will be asked the question, and then you will have to record your answer to that question as if it was an interview, but not really. This recording then gets sent off to a recruiter, and they will assess that as if it was a normal interview. It is a little bit odd, but face-to-face and live interviews are very, very common as well. Usually what these are involved is you will be either in a room or virtually in a room through Skype or Zoom, or you have an interview or a panel of interviewers asking you questions. Again, what they're really trying to assess around this is, are your skills, your talents, your motivations, your values suitable for the job you're going for? The final part about this is very common in big employers as well, is something called an assessment centre, which can be a half day, a full day. And what that would usually involve is you doing a range of different tests, again, assessing your ability to do the on-the-day job. The most common form this takes is something called a group exercise, which will be no stranger to you from the many group tasks you'll have done in your degree. But what this usually involves is you might be placed in a group of 5 or 6, you'll be observed by assessors, and they'll give you a group task to complete in 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. For example, let's say you're going for a business marketing role, you might be given some data about some products, some research, and what you'll be asked to do is in 50 minutes, come up with a marketing plan for that, and then present it back to the assessors at the end of the group exercise. Now, of course, the big question here as well is also how are these recruitment processes changed after COVID? And it probably will be no surprise that what's happened is a lot of them have become virtual. So instead of face-to-face interviews, these are usually done either Skype or Zoom, or over a telephone, or in a lot of cases actually moved over to video interviews. Similarly with assessment centres, what you'll find is often they might either do it virtually, which means that you will still do the same group exercise live with a group of other people, but you'll be viewing them as a gallery view on Zoom or something like that, and then you have to present back as you normally would. The difference is that you're doing it in your own living room or your bedroom or wherever. Or what we've also been seeing recently is where employers have been giving students perhaps a task or a piece of data or project maybe a day or 2 days before, and then they have to present about that after a day on what they found and things like that. Usually what you'll find with both these areas is that large employers have a lot more stages than smaller employers. So from my own experience, an example is let's take the NHS graduate employment scheme, which is one of the top 5 in the UK. There what you'll face is application form, psychometric test, a networking event, an interview, and then an assessment centre. So it's a real gauntlet to get you through. Then I actually applied for a local NHS role and just had to do an application form and an interview. So usually what you'll find is smaller employers have a lot less. I'm going to hand over to Maxine in a moment now just to give you some of our top tips and start the Q&A going. However, before that, I did want to highlight that we've only got half an hour today. And usually actually a lot of what you guys will really need to stand out in your applications is some one-to-one support and really considering how your skills, how your story really fits in with that employer. So we do have application coaching appointments, career coaching appointments, mock interviews, and a range of online resources that can help you with this and help you every single stage of the application process I've just outlined. So do check those out after the Q&A. Thank you, Maxine. Do you want to share your wisdom around applications?
Hi everybody, I'm Maxine. I'm really glad to be here today to talk a little bit about how you can help yourself stand out more in the application process. So as Sam has shown, there are a lot of different things that you might encounter in an application process, and we can't go through all of them right now. So what I thought I would do is share a couple of top tips for you before we then go into the Q&A. And obviously, if you want to pick up on any of those in more detail in the Q&A, you can do so. Make sure you post your questions there. So the tips I'm going to give you, and I'm going to give you 3 tips. These can be applied for any type of application process. So whether it's for a job, whether it's for some volunteer work, whether it's for a further study course, you can use these tips. And similarly, they apply for whether you're doing something in writing as part of the application process, or if it's something more verbal. So for example, part of the interview process, or maybe an assessment centre as well. So my first tip for you is be example focused. So this is something that people often get wrong or don't do very well. People tend to talk very generally about their experiences, but it's really important to give examples, particularly when you're asked to talk about skills. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, I mean, don't just talk about a particular experience you've had, such as a time that you worked as a course rep, or maybe a part-time job you had in a supermarket. Really try to hone in on a scenario within that experience that you can use to talk about your behaviours, your actions, your skills. So for example, maybe you had to negotiate a bit of a disagreement in one of your course rep meetings, or maybe when you're in a supermarket and you're working there was a really tricky customer or someone that was very confused. So try to hone in on that scenario, and don't forget to talk about the results as well. So if you're, for example, talking about how effective your communication skills are, you need to talk about the outcome of your behaviour. So how do we know that those communication skills actually worked well? So that's really important. And the other thing is try and talk about what you learned from your experience. So employers are very interested, particularly now, around skills like resilience, how you deal with challenges. So sometimes you might be talking about experiences that didn't go very well. That's okay. Try to think about what you learned from that particular example and draw on that when you're evidencing it to the employer. You might be familiar with something called the STARS technique. That can be a really good way to structure your answers to these sorts of questions, both in writing and verbally. And don't worry if you don't know what the STARS technique is. That is something that you can find out more about on our website and just good old Google as well. So my second tip for you guys would be do your research. So I can't tell you how many times I've had a one-to-one with a student and I've said, okay, tell me about the job that you're applying for. And they've said, I don't really know what it is. If you don't know what the job is, you probably shouldn't be applying for it. So make sure you know what it is that you're actually getting into. To do a successful application, you really need to be very specific when you're talking about why you're interested, whether it be a course or a job or an experience. And in order to do that, you need to have a good grasp on the organisation and the role of a course, and research can help you do that. So how can you do effective research? Well, obviously a great starting point is the website, but don't just stop there. So go beyond the website. For example, do they use social media? Have they got any panels that you can follow? Do they have a LinkedIn account? Can you connect with them there? You might see that they're being talked about in the news, or if not them, their sector in general. So, get on Google, really find out a little bit about them. Sometimes you also find that there are blogs or forums where people might be discussing the organisation or the sector, and they're really useful as well. And don't forget to ask around. You might find that actually some of your friends or peers have applied to the same organisation or for the same course and have some tips for you. Or you might know someone that's working in that sector or even for that specific company. So really use a range of resources to do your research. Now, my third and final tip before we go to the Q&A is probably the most important thing that you can do to have a successful application. and that is to tailor your application. Now, the concept of tailoring is something we talk about a lot, and it might sound a bit jargony. What do we mean by that? Well, if you think about getting an item of clothing tailored, what does that mean? It means it's specific to your measurements, it's bespoke to you, it's unique. And that's what the application should be specific to that particular opportunity. Now, if you're using the same kind of CV and cover letter time and time again, you're very unlikely to be successful. Employers will spot that straight away. So what you need to do is use that research, use your specific examples to make that application really tailored to whatever that opportunity is. So an example of that might be that in the course overview, they talk about the different things that you'll be doing on the masters, or in the job description, they'll talk about the skills that are required. Each and every one of those skills or experiences should be really clear in your CV, in your personal statement, whatever it might be that you're creating. And it should be easy to find and very explicit. The person reading isn't going to make any assumptions, so you need to make it clear for them. The other thing is that you need to make your motivations really clear and align your passions, your interests and your values for those of the opportunity and the organisation you're applying to. And the research will help you find out what they are. But often that's the thing that people don't put a lot of work into. They don't talk a lot about why they're passionate or interested. And certainly that's very important in terms of tailoring, but from the perspective of the person who's reviewing your application as well. That is something that people find quite hard. It is challenging, but don't forget that's something that we can help you with in careers. So we can talk you through that. We can help you reflect on what those passions, values, motivations might be and how to bring that out, whether it's in an interview or a written application. Okay, so those are my 3 top tips that I've got. So example focus, do your research, and most importantly, use those to create a tailored application. So what we'd like to do now is obviously hand over to you guys for the Q&A. I can see there's already some questions coming in, and Sam and I are going to take it in turns to address some of those. So keep typing as they come through. And you can also, I think I'm correct in saying, use the sort of like button if you're interested in a question that's come up, and then we'll be able to see that that's a particular popular query. So the first question that I can see, which has had a like actually as well, and I'll hand this over to you, Sam, is someone saying that they hate video interviews, a very common one. How do they get better at them? So Sam, your expertise.
Thanks, Maxine. I hate video interviews as well, so I'm glad you asked that. So there's a number of different things that I think would be really good for getting better at video interviews. We've got some great resources at the university that really help you get that. So there's 2 things there. There's, first of all, getting good at interviews and answering interview questions in general, because the skills of giving a good interview answer will be exactly the same, whether it's for a normal face-to-face interview or a video interview. And the second one is actually getting specifically good and used to doing video interviews themselves. I'd share an anecdote from my own experience. I had lots of years of experience of doing face-to-face interviews, but the first time I ever did a video interview, I was feeling pretty confident because I'd done it before, but actually almost froze because of how weird it felt just talking to nobody and having just your screen saying back at you. So the way that I would recommend getting used to that is just getting exposure and getting used to answering interview questions over video conferencing software. Luckily, we at the university's career service, what we've signed up for this year is something called Launchpad, which is some video interview software. You can find out details about how to access this on our website, but what this does basically is let you sign up for an account and then take a mock interview as if you're doing a video interview normally. So what you'll do is you'll log in, you'll go into some software, it'll ask you a question, and then you can first of all record your answers, but then also first of all see them back, so it will get posted to you. You can access them and think about how you can improve. But also we have access to this as well. So what you can do is book a mock interview review with us, where we'll go over your answers together and really work out how you can improve. I really recommend doing that because it's not only a really good way of getting used to your general interview skills on video interview software, but also will help you with your answers more generally. And I guess the second point around being just good at interviews is to adopt some of the skills that Maxine just talked about, like, for example, using examples consistently, making sure that you really have good, strong research and know your motivations for that role and be able to say that in an application. What you'll also find with video interviews is usually you'll have a max time limit that you're allowed. So, for example, a very standard max time limit is 2 minutes for a question. What I've seen when I've been reviewing students' video interviews is that a lot of students don't use this full time to their advantage. So, you have 2 minutes and they might speak for 30 seconds. Usually a good rule of thumb is if you're not using the majority of that time, you're not giving enough detail. So really, you've got those 2 minutes to sell yourself, make use of the most of it. I think that's probably enough around video interviews. I'd highlight that again, like just getting generally good interviews through practicing mock interviews and looking at our online resources is also a great way of doing that. Let's see what other questions we've got, and I'll chuck this one over to Maxine. So Maxine, there's one about whether you should include a cover letter with your application and what you should include in this cover letter. Would you mind taking this?
Thanks, Sam. So this is a really good question. Often a cover letter might be optional and people sort of wonder, should I include that? There isn't necessarily a right or wrong, but I would say if you're given the option to include a cover letter, it's usually a good idea, particularly if there isn't a very extensive application. So sometimes there might be an application form, a CV, some questions, and actually the cover letter could be overkill. But if the only other sorts of things that you're sharing as part of the application process is the CV and maybe not much else, the cover letter can add a lot of value. I would really suggest actually taking the time, using the research to create a really good cover letter. So what should that cover letter involve? Again, a really common query, because often people might not have come across cover letters before. Cover letters are very traditional, they're a bit old-fashioned, so try to format them like a letter, and there's examples of these on our website if you're not sure what that should look like. And then structurally wise, you would have a brief introduction, sort of like who you are, what you're applying for. Then maybe a paragraph related to your capabilities, so you'd be addressing the skills as are outlined in the course description of the job role. Use your examples, don't forget that. And then a paragraph about your motivations. That's really key, actually. A lot of people overlook that, but thinking about why you're actually applying, not only for that company or university, but that particular job or course as well. And that's really important, because if, for example, the only other thing you're sharing as part of the process is your CV, those motivations won't really come through in the CV, even though your skills might. So really put some time in, do a nice paragraph about that, and then just a little bit of a kind of summary and ending and sign off. Typically, we recommend about a page for a cover letter, so it doesn't have to be really long. It's more quality than quantity. But yeah, try to cover those key things around your capabilities and how they link to the role, and importantly, your motivations, why you're applying. Don't just repeat your CV. That's a really key thing. Again, as with any of these, it's something that we can help you with. So if you want to draft up a cover letter and then talk it through with an advisor, you can do that in the appointments. But we also have a section on the website about cover letters, so you can check out some example cover letters and some of that guidance around the structure as well. Okay, probably enough about cover letters. So let's have a look at what other questions we've got. Quite a few different things coming in. Let's see. So, okay. Question here for you, Sam. I'm looking for ways to make my application stand out from the rest. What are some different ways that I can do this? Really great question. So I'll hand that over to you.
Thank you, Maxine. Excellent question. What are the ways that you can make your application stand out from the rest? So first of all, just echoing Maxine, is first of all to make sure you are using examples every time you can, showing your research and actually tailoring it to the specific employer. And as a general rule of thumb, it's far better to make a few well-tailored, well-researched applications than it is to send out 100 generic applications. You're far more likely to be successful there. Some other things that you can really make your application stand out for are, first of all, focusing on your achievements. As Maxine said, including the specific detail about what you achieved and what you did can really make you stand out. So for example, let's say you were going for an application which involved some sort of communication and public speaking skills, part of the job description. There you might say, oh, well, I did public speaking as part of my degree. But actually what you want to include there is some specific detail that shows how good an achievement that is and the scale of what you achieve. So for example, you could take, I gave public speaking part of my degree gave a regular series of presentations to groups of 30 students, something like that. Especially if you've got some good feedback, good results from that presentation, again, including them can really make you stand out compared to others. As well as that, also kind of linked to the cover letter, but do not underestimate the power of really being able to sell your motivations to a graduate employer. All the graduate employers I talk to actually say that one of the key things they're looking for is not so much lots and lots of relevant experience, but actually someone who is motivated, someone who is proactive and has some of the transferable skills that they'll need for the role. So in terms of that, if we look at motivations, you might have, let's say me and Maxine are applying for the same job. I've got loads of experience, but Maxine is able to really show her motivations with strong examples, show research about the company, and also show her transferable skills to a graduate employer who's looking for potential rather than just a finished project right there. She's actually much more attractive than me, even though I have a lot more experience. As well as that, there's also a number of different ways that you can get better with your application, really stand out. So first of all, in terms of doing that research, it is going to the next level. So that can be, as Maxine said, going deeper than the website. Something that I really see stand out with a lot of students is when they actually take the proactive step and speak to the employer directly before applying. So talking to an employer, seeing what it is they actually want from a job, because job descriptions can be confusing, and really understanding that can, first of all, make a good impression to that employer because it shows you're proactive, but also give you that next level insight, which again can make you stand out. Final thing I'd probably say is also, instead of approaching your application and the job description as a thing of thinking, oh, I don't have this, think of as many positive examples you can about where you do have this. The number one challenge that I think I face with students in their applications is they come to me and say, these are all the reasons that I shouldn't be good for this job, or these are the things that I don't have. Instead, if we focus on the good things that you do have, whether that's from your degree, from your general experience beyond work experience, such as volunteering, that can make for a really powerful narrative for your application. I think that's probably enough out there. So I guess in summary, that is showing your achievements, doing your research, reselling your motivations, and finally being positive overall, as well as, of course, getting it checked with the Career Development Service. Let's have a look at the other questions coming in. So we've got, let's see if we've got any ones. So one here, great question. Can I use the career service after I graduate? Maxine, do you want to take this? Hopefully it'll be quite a short answer.
Thank you. That was probably the easiest question that we've had today. Yes. Yeah, we're very proud of the fact that here at Leicester we offer a career service for life. We hope you won't need it for very long. But certainly you can access all of the services that we offer even after you graduate, and basically for as long as you need them. So you will find, like, some universities, they might have like a year or two cut off. For us, that's not the case. So even if in the future, for example, you wanted a career change, you could always come back and talk to us then. I won't go into too much detail, but it's very easy. You basically just set up a graduate account with us with your personal contact details, and then through that you can access all of our appointments in the same way that you would as a student through our My Careers platform. I feel a little bit guilty taking that question because it was such a quick one, so perhaps I can answer one of the others that's appeared before I pass back to Sam. I don't want to give him the short straw on this one. So this is a really interesting question here from Charlie. What CV format is best? Now, this is I could talk about this for hours, Charlie. We haven't got enough time, but the answer is it depends. I'm going to be a bit vague here because what you will find is different employers and different sectors will favour different types of CV format. If you come and talk to us in the career service, we often talk about a standard CV, and that for us would be a 2-page CV, chronological format, where you start with your most recent experience and work backwards and include things like your work, your skills, your education. But you've probably seen other versions of CVs that are much longer. You've almost certainly will have seen 1-page CVs as well. So there isn't really a right or wrong here because, as I say, it will depend on the employer. If you've got a 1-page CV and it's selling all of your skills and experiences effectively, that's great. What I would suggest is if you're not sure what type of CV to use, then the standard 2-page chronological is probably the best version to go with. But again, coming back to the top tips, do a little bit of research. You might find online that if you sort of Google or have a look on some forums, that maybe that employer has said somewhere that actually a 1-page is their preference, and in that case, go for that. The only thing I would say to be wary of is a really, really long CV. unless you're someone that's going for like an academic type position where you might be listing a lot of publications or conferences. Typically something that's more than 2 pages will just be a little bit too long for the employer, because they will be reviewing it very quickly. We have got examples of different formats of CVs on our website. So you can see a 1-page CV, you can see a 2-page CV, an academic CV, and we've also got some that are a little bit different structured. So for example, one that focuses more on the skills if, for example, you're like a career changer. So take a look at those, and as I would always say, if you're not sure, come and talk to us in the career service as well. Okay, so we're getting a little bit towards the end of the time, but I reckon we've got time for another couple of quick questions. So let's see what we've got here for you, Sam. Oh, there's a question here that says, if I have an online test as part of my application, is there somewhere that I can practice those? So I'll hand that one over to you.
Thanks, Maxine. Yes, there is. Again, another short answer. So practice is absolutely crucial for these types of online tests. Practice will really, really help you improve your answers, improve your speed, but also just get used to the format, to be a bit more familiar with it. And definitely you don't want to have it the first time that you face it be for your dream graduate scheme or something like that. So we, again, like Launchpad, we as a career development service sign up and subscribe to a resource called Graduates First, which is basically a huge provider of a lot of different online types of psychometric assessment. You normally have to pay for it, but we paid for it for you. And basically, as a Leicester student, you get access to it for free, not only when you're a student, but also when you graduate as well. Now, what this involves is a number of different assessments, but also really usefully, at the end of that, what you'll be sent is a report which details where you did well and where you need to improve. So, for example, it might be that actually your accuracy is really, really high, but your timing is very, very slow. So what you need to work on is not getting the questions right, it's getting them right in a quicker manner. So that can be very, very useful as well. I'd say alongside that, we also offer career coaching, which we can support you with coming up with a plan for how you can improve your psychometric test performance. So probably what I'd say to do if you're looking to get better at psychometric tests is go on to Graduates First, practice a few tests, then book an appointment with us where we can coach you through how you can get even better at that. Doing that and getting good at that will be a really good way of standing out, especially to the big employers. I think we've got time for one more question. So let's have a look here and see which one would be best. I think actually the last question is probably something we haven't touched on too much. So I'll hand this over to you, Maxine. But Anonymous has asked, what does a master's application usually involve and can we help with this?
Thanks, Sam. So yes, we certainly can help with this. A student actually once asked me, will we help with an application for a master's if it's not at Leicester? Yes, we certainly will. So don't worry, as great as it would be if you continue your studies here, we will help you with your application for further study wherever you might be wanting to go. And yeah, you can come and talk to us about that like you would with any sort of application process. So in terms of what a master's application usually involves, it can be a little bit different to an undergraduate application, not least because when you apply at master's level, you're often applying directly to the university. So unlike an undergrad where you go through UCAS, it's a bit less standardised. So you would be doing whatever that university has asked for. Usually, though, there is a personal statement, so very similar to what you would have done for your undergraduate application. So that would be you talking about your interest in the course, maybe a bit about your career aspirations, of course, your skills and experience as well. And then the main difference between a master's application is usually you'll be asked for a CV as well, I guess because it provides a nice summary of your experience and education. So again, come and talk to us if that's something you need support with. Other things that you might encounter, well, sometimes there might be some application questions. Sometimes, depending on the course, you might be asked to attend an interview or complete an online test. So, you know, nothing that is hugely dissimilar from the sorts of things Sam talked about at the beginning. And without going into too much detail, we can offer support for PhD applications as well. So we do team up with the doctoral college on that. So if you're thinking beyond masters also, that is something that we can help with. But yeah, if you're interested in that, again, guidance on the website and come and book in for an appointment with us. Okay, so that is pretty much all we have time for today. We hope it's been useful, we really do. Sorry if we weren't able to answer your question. But just to reiterate, there's a lot of resources on the website, so not just guidance but actually example documents, which can be really useful if you want to see what some of these things look like. Obviously Sam's talked about some of the resources around video interviews and psychometric tests that are available, and you know, we're still here for you virtually. Even now that the semester might be over, we still work through the summer, so you can come and talk to us at any point on Skype, by phone, by Teams. We've got appointments through all of those virtual means, so we can keep giving you that support throughout the summer and beyond. And for those of you that are graduating, don't forget that it is support for life as well. Okay, well, that's it from us. It was great to be able to speak to you today and do this Q&A. And yeah, take care, enjoy the rest of your day.